Coastal flooding of existing cities and towns, thankfully, is rare. But with climate change, it will become more frequent. Where the risk is increasing due to sea level rise, we need to adapt our existing buildings and neighborhoods to be resilient.
Hello, I'm Wendy Gilbertson. I'm a longtime resident of the Davis Bay area, and I have a house across the street from the beach. On occasion, we would have floods during severe weather storms in this area. In the past, some water would come across the highway, but it would soak right into the ground. And the recent changes that we've noticed is the water comes across and it accumulates. This is a picture of my house, February 6, 2006. This is when we had a severe storm event. The wind was blowing in the right direction. We had high tide and the house got flooded. The water could not escape back over to the ocean. We had tenants in the house that we had to take out by boat. There was damage done to the house. We have, the electrical wires underneath and the telephone wires all got salt damage. All the insulation underneath the house was damaged, and the floors got wet, and we had to fix all that. To help mitigate the damage or future damage, what we did is we put in a berm in the front of the house, and also we have plans to lift the house and put it on pilings. And in the future, if the water comes over, it can go under and we can wait for it to leave, and we don't have to worry about excessive property damage. 2 houses over from my house is a house that was severely damaged. It was ground level, and there was quite a bit of water inside, and the neighbors did mitigate that by raising the house and putting it on piers.
Sea level rise will add to the depth of coastal flooding. 30 centimeters, or 1 foot, can make a small car float away, and with current can pull you off your feet. Extra flood depth of 60 centimeters, about 2 feet, over expected storm surge levels caused this hospital to evacuate after floods cut out the generators. Flooding over 60 centimeters in a building often lead to its demolition. In many cases, new or reconstructed buildings aren't permitted in a coastal floodplain. Where situations justify rebuilding, authorities have encouraged methods to accommodate future floods with minimum damage to buildings, property, or life. Elevated structures, also called dry floodproofing, raises the site and building to a level where it's safe from flooding. This residence is constructed about 1.5 meters higher than the older house next door. Its elevation is guided by local government bylaws that set new flood construction levels with an allowance for sea level rise. In another new single-family example, the lower floors can be designed with floodable uses, such as parking. This is called wet floodproofing. Residential living quarters are kept above the flood construction level. Existing buildings and floodplains may be lifted onto new foundations, with floodable construction and uses on the ground floor. Some buildings may be on pilings, and others may be on a floodable crawl space, with arrangements made for the flooding to pass safely under the habitable floors. In wet floodproofing, lower floor building material choices A larger example of wet floodproofing is a semi-waterfront apartment. The lower floor is designed as parking garage and other non-residential uses, and they could withstand flooding with lower consequence. The elevated habitable floors have a better view of the sea than if they were at grade, and they keep residents safe during a flood. Wet floodproofing isn't perfect. It means access roads could be flooded and emergency vehicles can't get through. But wet floodproofing does provide a human refuge until tidewaters recede.
Any increase in sea level rise and its impacts are going to tax our already strained volunteer fire department resources.
Unfortunately, flooded buildings and infrastructure are often uneconomic to repair or protect, leaving a post-flood mix of vacant lots with population and business decline. This can destroy the viability of a community. Eventually, sea level rise of several meters over the centuries will make neighborhoods retreat to higher ground. and building assets do come to the end of their useful life. Decisions at that time should consider whether to rebuild higher in the same location or move to a higher, drier site. First Nations in British Columbia have moved upslope to adjust to increased water levels over millennia. There are remnants of flooded villages off the coast of Haida Gwaii. If we think ahead, we can plan subdivisions and neighborhoods that are already prepared by design for sea level rise.
Good morning, my name's Ian Wynn, and I'm a director with the Sunshine Coast Regional District, and I represent Area F, which is West Howe Sound, and this morning we are here at Hopkins Landing on the Sunshine Coast. The story of Hopkins Landing goes back to the early 1900s when Captain George Hopkins, who owned most of the land, he decided that he wanted to subdivide. There was a general store and a post office here at the time, and he wanted to subdivide it, and in doing so, though, he felt that he wanted to create a public access area in front of all of the lots. So he actually created a strata titled for a deeded part of an esplanade in front of all of the lots at Hopkins, and that was there to provide for public access as well as for the residents to go up and down the shoreline and get back and forth to the store and the post office.
The corridor of common property at the shore allows a flexible, economical, and neighborhood-scale response to sea level rise. The siting of the buildings and roads on higher ground provides great views of the water, allows shoreline habitat to remain, and eliminates risk of damage from coastal floods. We need to avoid building new communities in locations where they'll have to be relocated when sea level rise dictates. But where buildings and neighborhoods already exist in a coastal floodplain, there are adaptation innovations that can provide interim relief to reduce the consequences of coastal floods. In some areas, these actions will only be temporary, with a need for larger scale retreat or rebuild to higher ground at a point when asset life is complete or sea level rise flooding can no longer be accommodated.